motivation behind the creation of AgriTechE was, I guess, an itch that I'd had since for 20 years. I used to be a researcher back in the day, and I did some work with farmers. And I spent a lot of time, like all good researchers do, telling farmers what they wanted and what they needed and why this science was important. And a very lovely farmer took me aside and very quietly and diplomatically suggested that instead of telling the farmers what they wanted, I might like to ask them what they needed. And that was a bit of a shock, really. And that led to me thinking, golly, we really need something that connects up research and farming a little bit more closely. So I did a Nuffield scholarship looking at ways of communication between farmers and scientists, and went to various places around the world where they were actually doing it really well. So I'd always had this thing that I really wanted to do something that helped connect up practice in agriculture and the innovation agenda. And before this job, I was the lead technologist for bioscience for what was the Technology Strategy Board and is now Innovate UK. And that was grand and I was enjoying it. But then the National Agri-Tech strategy came out, and a number of people came together and said, we really need a thing that sort of connects up this research innovation agenda and the innovative farmers. And that's how AgriTechE was born. I spend a lot of time defending the fact that I don't think we have what one would call an agri-tech sector. Now, I understand that government need to call it a sector because in order to support it, they need to be able to measure it, the whole measure to manage agenda, right? So I understand why we have to call it the agri-tech sector, and I understand that it's been very helpful in advancing the narrative in the UK. But there are a lot of companies who are very active in agri-tech and are developing innovations that support agriculture, but they wouldn't call themselves agri-tech companies. So I think we have to be quite careful with the definition. So my myth is that agri-tech is a sector in and of itself. I think what agri-tech is a collection of enabling technologies that support agriculture and horticulture and make them more productive and efficient and sustainable. I think there's three things that I'm most proud of. Obviously, the first is the team. And when people say that we're the go-to organisation and that they had a professional and helpful and friendly response, that makes me super happy. The second thing is the diversity of the membership. So when I first wrote the original business plan, I always knew that to have an innovation ecosystem, you needed to have that diversity. And I wasn't, if I'm honest, 100% sure how to create that diversity. But by having a value proposition that appeals to different organisations and people within the ecosystem, we seem to have been able to do it. And our membership is now spread across research, innovation, tech development, farming, business support, professional and technical service providers, and investors, in fact. So I think I'm quite proud of how that's turned out. And also, when we started 10 years ago, other than the National Agri-Tech strategy, there wasn't really much flesh on the bones of what was then being called agri-tech. So I guess our inception helped really shape the UK narrative by just sort of expanding and bringing to life what that concept of agri-tech could really look like as an innovation ecosystem. Our members, particularly the startups and the research community, are such a rich source of bleeding edge ideas, concepts, thinking. So really working with that proportion, particularly of the community, but also the farmers, they're constantly looking for the next big thing. And so talking to people, I guess, is the short answer of how we stay up with the trends. We do a lot of reading, we go to a lot of events, and we get people coming to us saying, is this really left field? Would this ever work? And that's part of what we really like, is hearing things that we haven't seen before and stretching ourselves and the technologies, and then putting it in front of farmers to go, actually, would this work? Is this need? Is this a technology or an idea that is looking for a problem, or is it really solving a real need? So talking to people, reading, going to events, and thinking, because sometimes just sitting quietly and thinking makes you have some fresh perspectives on how something existing could be applied in the industry. Leadership's a funny thing, isn't it? There's so many definitions of it. And I guess the way I view leadership is someone that's sort of showing strength and knowledge and determination and dignity, bringing people along with them where possible, and being super passionate about a particular cause. Now, I could spend the rest of the day naming people that I think fit into that category, but somebody that I've actually been really inspired by is Minette Batters, the outgoing president of the National Farmers Union. I think she's shown all of those traits and has delivered them with grace and insight. So I would say Minette Batters. So every week is a busy week. So on a Friday night, I tend to go out and be with my animals, sheep, alpaca, dogs, and the alpaca in particular are really interesting in making you be quiet and calm and mindful and slow your breathing and just calm. And I have to admit, sometimes I might have a cheeky beer or a glass of wine in my hand when I do that, but nothing grounds you back into real life than being surrounded by animals that are just being mindful as well.